Hello and welcome back, this is ProTaleDev back with another Dungeon Farm Tycoon. What we're going to be looking at today is the building stats specifically. I really wanted to get those finished. They're part of the original objectives we wanted a long time ago in the very first episode, so I really want to get them finished. Once that's done, that's all of the basic objectives hit, and we're really down to the fine-tuning and fixing issues that weren't quite finished. Things like the weapons, doing certain amounts of damage, and the monsters, attacks being correct. And maybe some extra little effects here and there, but it's really about them balancing and trying to figure out what we need to do to get everything finished, and maybe adding some more levels, which shouldn't be too hard since the objective system is in the game. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So first of all, if I press play here, you're going to notice immediately that the objectives is now somewhat gone. Let me actually make it bigger just so you can see it a little bit easier. So what I've done is I've minimized the objectives to just be on this right side up here. So instead you've got this little tab here that you can open, and you can just, this little window, and see the objectives summarized. Really this is kind of, I was going to have both. I was going to have this and the option to bring up a menu. But I felt like the menu and stuff that I'd worked on previously just didn't really, it wasn't necessary. We just need a small menu that we can just open up whenever we need. So that's done. So another issue that we had was that regardless of the store that the player would go in, they would still make the same money. There actually wouldn't be any difference, even if we used a high level. Like if I chose something completely different, they would actually still make the same money, and that's been fixed now. It's all correct, depending on what the actual store is, like high level the store is. So if we go for something like a market, you would definitely have the opportunity to make him more. That's if the guests actually have money. Another thing to mention is that now when a guest doesn't have a house or a place to rest, they'll actually lose a tremendous amount of happiness. They'll actually lose 20 happiness, which is a huge amount of happiness to lose, especially because once it's past 50% or lower. Once it gets lower than 50%, they'll actually start considering leaving. So another thing that's changed is that the different shops now have, or the level of the shop, let's say a market compared to the original stand. So if the guests actually go into these shops, what they'll do is they'll actually get an increase in equipment rating, happiness, and gold, depending. Well, they'll lose the gold, but it'll depend on the happiness and rating. So this way, if you have something like a stall compared to a market, now if they go to a stall, it'll only be a small amount of rating increase, happiness, and obviously the gold will be decreased, obviously, because it needs less for that specific item. But if we go into a market, they're going to need a lot more gold, so they're going to lose more gold if they buy something, but there'll be a massive increase in happiness and equipment rating. So now better houses also extend the time that a guest will leave, and it'll also increase happiness. So before, what we had is a very basic house, but now it's really important to get those higher leveled houses, not the upgraded house, but the actual higher levels, like the tower and the large inn, because they will increase a lot more they'll provide a lot more happiness when they've rested, and they'll extend the leave depending on where they've stayed, so depending on their comfort rate. However, houses also now require gold to maintain, as well as food and water. So when a guest stays there and they finish and they come out of the house, they'll actually take one food and one water, so per guest, but they'll also take the gold depending on the actual building itself, the maintenance. So these guys are going to start pulling down your gold and your money and things. So if you end up lowering their happiness even after they've gone to a shop, then you could be losing out if they end up leaving afterwards. Dungeons will also now give a lot more gold, and depending on their level of rating, I did a lot of testing and found it just wasn't enough. We've also got custom dungeons will give far more gold and double happiness on completion compared to a normal dungeon entrance. This is because it's more exciting, you know, it's a custom dungeon, so get some more interested, and they'll earn a lot more gold, so it's going to be more advantageous rather than just having a normal dungeon entrance, which previously they were all pretty much the same, they all had the same values. Now let's go into the really big thing, which was the building stats. So the easiest way to demonstrate this is actually on the buildings right here, so we can click on our bungalow, and you can see that immediately we have these stats. Now it's on a bit of a small screen, so what I can do is maybe, hopefully in the video I've zoomed in a little bit, but basically what you'll see in is a little bit of a description. You'll see a current effect, which is just our basic description without any upgrades. Then we have our upgrade effect. Of course, then you have the upgrades costs, which are usually materials, and it starts off easy depending on the building, but gradually gets more and more resources. Generally the resource needed is the same, but the amount is different. So it starts off really easy with this bungalow. It's just 5 gold, water is 18, food is 20, wood is 15. That seems like a lot considering how much we're producing, but eventually you'll have massive islands, hopefully, which will be producing tremendous amount of resources. We can't actually upgrade anything because we don't have enough resources. Of course, we can see what resources we got here. So we do have enough wood, we do have enough, we have enough gold, but we actually don't have enough water or food. So let's see if we can, let's restart actually, because we'll start off with a little bit more. And let's immediately build some. We know that the issue is going to be water and food, so let's quickly grab some of these. And while we're waiting, what we can actually do is, while this is building up, we can actually look at the other upgrades. So again, like I mentioned, this one is really all about, obviously I've just restarted, so this is actually now a house, so it's going to cost a little bit more, but that's fine, we'll leave it running. Let's look at some of the upgrades for the other ones. So we've also got the cave entrance, and it's very different. So instead, guests will earn +1 more gold, which can help in stores. They'll also have a current effect increase, and this is just the general starting effect, so they'll increase the limit to how many guests can actually come to the island. And then we have a very basic description, and of course the resources are different. So we do start off with wood, which I think wood is the basic resource for all of our buildings and all of our structures. But then we have our silver ore and gold ore. This is one of the more rarer ores in the game. It costs more to put down a mine. It's one of the more harder ones to earn. However, when you do upgrade it, it will provide I think the second effect. We'll go over what individual effects there are in a minute. Okay, so I've just fast forward to when I actually have enough money and gold and stuff like that, so that we can actually upgrade. I did change the house back to a bungalow just so it's a little bit quicker. But what you'll notice immediately is that now that we have enough money, we can now upgrade. So what should happen is the next effect should change, and our current effect should be updated to what we can now do. Also, our materials should change as well. So let's try that out. So there you go, we've upgraded it. Our bungalow is now a level 2 bungalow, and you can actually see the numbers here. We've actually upgraded it once, but we can upgrade it a second time and then a final third time. And what you can see is that the description hasn't changed, but our effects have. So now it includes +2 happiness to anyone who stays. That was our first effect. Now what we also have is, what we can do is we can upgrade it again, and it's -1 less food and water per person. Now we can upgrade this again, but I'm not going to unless I have enough, which I don't. I'm just barely able to keep up with water, so even this reservoir is not enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at something else for now. Again, I don't know if I showed this one, but the weapon stall also provides something different, so more rating. You also have different ingredients, so iron and copper, as well as wood and gold. So I'll show those effects in a minute of what each one does. But the next thing I want to show off is so now I've slowed down the speed, let's click on this adventure right here, and let's have a look at the stats. So I've actually changed the look of the stats quite a lot. It looks a little bit more neater, bit more clear. I've removed a few of the other stats, so things like how many times have they visited a store, a dungeon, or a house. Didn't seem relevant considering you can only visit a dungeon 5 times, which means you can only visit each one 5 times, and that's the maximum you can go before they actually leave, no matter what. So it didn't seem relevant to be able to just determine how many they can do, because you know how many maximum there are, and since it's only 5, it has no relevance on anything, so I removed it. With that, it meant I could clear it up a little bit. I kept the relevant stats in, so experience, current gold, equipment rating, current happiness, want to stay, and their thoughts, which has changed their actions. So before was their actions, now it's their thoughts. And this is a little bit more detailed. It's going to have a little bit more extra to some of their other actions. It's going to add a little bit more in-depth knowledge to some of them. The other thing is that if you highlight over them now, while this is open, it'll actually change it automatically. You won't have to, you don't have to click. I found that I had this originally, but I didn't really like it. I've just cleaned it up a little bit better. But essentially, if you have this open, you can now click, hover over them and have a look, and it'll completely update it. Of course, if you close it and you do the same, it no longer updates it. You have to actually click on a specific object you want to analyze. So in our case, if you want to click on something like this, or something like this, or just click on the adventurers, then that all works as well. Now, of course, the general design changes I actually think they're quite positive. I think they look much more cleaner, but along with those changes is this bar down here. It kind of parallels the top bar of resources to the bottom bar. So the bottom bar is actually more of a useful like tools essentially that you can open up. So you've obviously got the manager, we've got the character inventory, alchemy table, and the blacksmith forge. As well as next to that, we actually have the time, which was in the pause menu. I've changed it so that it's no longer in the pause menu because I did like to be able to see it and see how many days, and having to constantly go into our pause menu is really a big pain. We also have our speed in the center as well, right next to it, to try and kind of match it a little bit better. Having it up here and then having the speed down here kind of felt weird. Like, it didn't really match very well. Initially I was going to put this all at the top left, but it meant pushing this bar to the right, and then it doesn't feel like it's positioned correctly. Also, we had some issues with tracking with some of the houses and some of the building. That's also fixed, as well as issues finding the specific house's stats, the build stats, when a specific adventurer goes to a building, to be able to choose, for example, what effect they need or what money they have to give or take. When they're running into, say, a dungeon when they leave, or going to a shop, they weren't too sure, and it was giving us an error message. I saw it for a brief second, I think, in the last video, and that's now fixed as well. The lights, as you can see, are also fixed. There was an issue with the lights last time. That's fixed now, with hopefully some of the shadows now work, and you also see some of the effects of the light on the paths when it shines with the normal map. Kind of looks a little bit weird, so I don't know, I might change that. The satisfaction icon, the satisfaction that I had at the top right, I've removed it because you could already click on an adventurer or on a guest and see what their happiness was, and honestly, having this up there as an average, it meant that players just didn't need to click on the happiness of individual guests. And so I felt like it would make some of the stats in the adventurer redundant. I kind of want players to constantly check different adventurers to keep them busy, as opposed to just sitting around and doing nothing. Players then can at least look at different things and make decisions. It's just more things for the player to do while they're waiting for their goal to build up. Now, for the most part, that is everything I've done. There's also some extra pieces that I'm going to be working on from now on, but really we want to clean this game up. So I've cleaned up the UI a little bit. I think I'm going to keep it as it is. Another quick mention, I didn't put this in my notes, but I think I'll mention it now, is that the icons at the top right also look a little bit more faded, and so they aren't as distracting. And they're also moved to the left so you can actually see them, because before they were behind there. Thought I'd just quickly mention that. They look a little bit nicer, a little bit more well positioned. For the most part, that is everything, and yeah, as I just mentioned, I will be looking at trying to finish this game. Before I close this off, I want to show what the actual effects do. Now, this has had a ton of work done to it. This script is massive now. One of the biggest scripts I've got, and there is a lot to it. So first of all, we have our buildings. Just to keep the buildings kind of having the same type of effects, but just increased effects. So what I've done is I've made sure that all of the same types of building have the same effects, but just increased effects, if you get what I mean. So as an example, we have the bungalow that I just showed, +2 happiness to anyone who stays, -1 less food and water, and then when you upgrade it again, it's +3 rating score to the overall rating, and you've also got the final state, which after doing all the upgrades, this is what it will be left with. You'll have all the current effects showing, and then you'll actually have a title. This title is there just to try and tell the player that it's finished, you can't upgrade it anymore. All of the buildings have this, so you have the house, which again, 4 happiness, -2 food and water, +6 rating, and now you get all the same things, but you now have the house flipper title on the building. They all have different titles, and they all have certain amounts of effects, but they're all roughly the same. You'll have to check them out for yourself when the game is out to really have a play around with it. Next, we actually have the shops. Roughly the same, but with slight differences. Again, +1 rating, less unhappiness when you cannot buy something from a shop. You also have the next upgrade, which is increased effective armor by 1%. These stack, so one of the advantages in this game is that more buildings means more effects, especially with these shops. So the higher, let's say you've got 4 markets, let's go down here. If we go to the market, the weapon, and you'll get if let's say you upgrade it all the way through and you get the title armor specialist, what you can see here is that we get 4 rating. We also get less unhappiness by 4, but specifically increased effect of armor by 4%. This stacks onto other buildings, so that's a total of 16% increase. With 4 markets, you'll have 16% increase to armor. Now remember, the effects of the armor is determined in here in our weapons inventory, so what is equipped, and of course that determines this here. So let's say we got the armor guard, take less damage from monsters. This is now increased percentage of 16% if you have more armor stalls. You have the same thing with potions, so potions will have stronger effects, and weapons will also have stronger effects depending on how many buildings you have. So I'm not going to show them again because they're roughly very similar, kind of in different orders, but they're very similar. And then the final one is the dungeons. The dungeons have these entrances that you can place down, and first of all it starts by increasing the limit of guests, as mentioned before, and then we have increased the gold earned from dungeon when you complete it, lowering the chance of death by 1, which again stacks up, so you can really lower it down. If you get like a certain amount of dungeons, you can really lower it, and depending on the level as well. And we've also got the increase in the rating. Once you've got all that, you get a title. So this title for the very first entrance is Entrance to the Dark. We do the same thing all the way through, and then we get to the custom made ones, which are slightly different. You get rating first, then you get lower chance, and you also earn a lot more gold, and then finally get the title. These all stack, so having multiple will really be an advantage, but it means more costs, more upkeep, so it's really something that you're going to have to balance. So that was a lot that I had to go through, but hopefully I've made it a little bit more clear. So next, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at the weapons, finishing them completely by adding a little bit of animation and make sure that the damage is correct. And I'll be doing the same thing for the monsters as well, making sure their damage is correct and working in the dungeon. Making sure the dungeons are working correctly, all of it. And then finally, if I get time, I'll try and add an editor placement. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.